Let's continue with the next video from the series Windows Server 2016, and this is implementing network load balancing. Hello friends, this is Nick and this is NLB Solutions, and today I'm going to talk about NLB or network load balancing. And the biggest question is not how to implement this feature, but the biggest question is the NLB Solutions channel based on the NLB, the network load balancing? Well, this is a thing that I won't discover right now, so I guess you will have to stick with the channel and learn in the future about NLB and where the name came from. So first, I'm going to start by showing you what are the servers that I'm going to work with today. These are my domain controller, one of the servers that I used for my VPN configuration, and the other server is my storage server that I used for my storing my iSCSI disks. Of course, this is a test lab environment and I'm just going to install different things and different features and roles on the same servers, but I don't recommend doing this in production. If you want to have a proper web server, for example, that is hosting your important line of business websites, you will need to create a separate server for this. But for the testing purposes, this will do the trick. So the first mechanism that I want to show you is called Round Robin, and it utilizes the DNS role as a mechanism to load balance the connections from your users to your web servers. What you can do to configure the Round Robin is you can go to the DNS, open the zone where the servers are located and where the users are going to use to resolve IPs and host names. And what you need to do is add a new A record and specify the web page name. In my case, I'm going to just specify the www web page, and I'm going to add the IP address of my first server, which is 10.10.10.2, and add the host. And what you need to do next is you need to add another host record, which is going to be the same, but with different IP address, 10.10.10.11. So if I add this, and if I go to the properties of my DNS server, under the Advanced tab, I will see and I will need to have the enable round robin for the mechanism to work properly. And what this will do is my DNS server will provide my clients with the two IP addresses, and they will be distributed along the users so that the users can use both servers at the same time. What I mean, one client will be connected to my first server, one client will be connected to my second one. The downside using this is that there is no, you are not able to control this. So for example, if my second server, this one, goes down, it's not reachable, it's not available, my users will still be redirected to this server. And this is not a cool thing to have in production environment. So now that we have the round robin off the table, I'm going to continue with the NLB and the new features that were introduced in Windows Server 2016. I'm just going to say a few words about them. Microsoft implemented a NLB Windows PowerShell commandlets, so you can use PowerShell to configure your NLB clusters, which is cool if you think and if you want to configure scripting to be added into your environment. They gave you the ability to use the modules to configure your own scripts, and depending on the scripts you can configure the whole farms. You can add nodes in the cluster, remove nodes from the NLB cluster. So it's a cool new feature that Microsofts are really trying to add support for PowerShell as well. Other new features include that hosts can be part of multiple clusters. So you can have a single host that is part of that hosts multiple websites, and these websites are part of multiple NLB clusters, which is a cool thing to see. You can add and remove hosts without affecting the rest of the cluster, so that if you want to do a maintenance on your cluster, you can you can remove the host, do the maintenance, do the upgrades, and then re-add the server back to the cluster. So now that we have a brief understanding of what are the new features in the NLB cluster, let's dig into the demo where I'm going to install the NLB feature on both my servers. And what I have in there, as you saw in the intro, I have pre-installed an IIS server and an IIS role, and it is currently hosting a single page website, which I've modified so that you can distinguish between the two servers and when the first server is responding and when the second server is responding, so we can test and confirm our NLB implementation in the end. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to add roles and features, and I'm going to select my server and go to the features, scroll a bit down, and you can see that I have the network load balancing right here. I'm going to select this feature and click next, and I'm going to install this feature in here. I'm going to switch to my storage server, which is my second IIS server, and I'm going to pretty much do the same in here. Of course, as I said, Microsoft added the PowerShell commandlets, so you can use PowerShell to install and remotely install and remotely manage the NLB. So I'm not going to show this in here because I know that most people are still not PowerShell savvy, but if you want to see how you can do this in PowerShell, leave a comment in the section below and I will try to provide you with the guide for this. So I'm going to pause and wait for my NLB to finish installing. Now that I have the feature installed on my servers, I'm going to close this window, go to Tools and find the Network Load Balancing Manager. I'm going to open this one, and you can see that the console for network load balancing did not change that much, and it's pretty much still the same. I'm not sure in which version of Windows the network load balancing came, but I think it's way back in 2000, maybe 2003. If you have any information, you can always put it in the comment section below. So you can see if I try to expand my network load balancing cluster, it's not available. So I'm going to right click and create a new cluster. And I'm going to add the first host that is going to be part of the new cluster, which is going to be 10.10.10.10.11. Click connect. Of course, without seeing, I've added the wrong IP address and that's why it's not able to find it. I will just make a small adjustment in here, and I will need to verify my settings, and I have the BG info in the top right side, but I'm not sure why I'm not looking at it from time to time. So you can see that it automatically added the interface 0, Ethernet 0, which is my only network card that I have connected on this server. But in your scenario, you can have multiple cards. For example, you can separate the management from the client connections. On the network load balancing manager, you can dedicate a network for the network load balancing cluster as well. But for this one, and I'm going to just select this as an option. And you can see that on the next window I have the priority, and please note that the priority is based on the smallest number. So priority 1 is top priority, and this node will be my top 1 priority when the network load balancing mechanism kicks in. So in the table below, you can see that you have the dedicated IP address for the network load balancing cluster to work for the node to be reachable on this address. And of course you can edit this, you can change it if you'd like to another network card that you add after you configure the cluster. On the bottom, the initial host state, you can see that we have three states that are available in network load balancing, and you can see that the states are started, stopped, and suspended. We'll work with the different states on a later state, so I'm going to leave the defaults in here and click next. So in the next field, you can see that we have a window with the cluster IP addresses. So in here, I'm going to add the cluster IP address that I'm going to dedicate for my cluster. So every time a client computer connects to the cluster IP address, which is a virtual IP address, that IP address will redirect. First, it will check if my hosts underneath are available, and it will redirect the clients to the proper web server. So I'm going to choose an IP address which is going to be 10.0.0.122 because I know that this address is available at the moment in my environment, and this is just a random IP address that I choose to use. So after I add the cluster IP address, I can click next. And you can see the next window is the cluster IP configuration. The IP address is 10.0.0.122. The subnet mask, you can see that I can add a full internet name and the cluster operations mode. So I'm going to give you a brief explanation of the different operations modes, but what you can do is you can go on TechNet and read more about it, because this is going to be a lengthy video if I try to explain them thoroughly. So when you configure the NOB cluster to use the unicast mode, all the cluster hosts will use the same unicast MAC address for incoming traffic. For outgoing traffic, it's going to use a modified MAC address so that the switch is able to determine from where the traffic comes. There are a few problems with the unicast, and this is because most of the time there could be switch flooding. All the ports on the switch can be flooded with NOB traffic. So in most cases, if you want to configure the unicast, you need to double check with the networking, the underlying networking, and be sure that it's properly configured. Another thing that you can consider is if you are doing this in a virtual machine, you will need to enable the MAC address spoofing so that it can allow the traffic to go through. On the other hand, if you select the multicast option, each cluster host keeps its original MAC address, but is also assigned with an additional multicast MAC address. This way, the hosts in the NOB cluster can talk to each other when there is only a single network card added to every single host. And this can fix a problem with, for example, switch flooding, if you are experiencing switch flooding using the unicast operation mode. Of course, the underlying network switches and routers that support the NOB cluster need to support multicast MAC addresses as well. The last option is IGMP operation, and you can see that if I try to select this option, is going to tell me that I'll need to have the proper configuration and proper hardware, because the underlying hardware needs to support IGMP in order for me to select this option, this feature. Basically, this is a special form of multicast mode that prevents the network switch from being flooded with traffic. And if you don't have the proper underlying network components that support IGMP, it's most probably, or you're most probably going to work with multicast and unicast. So I'm going to select multicast in my case, and I'm going to click next. And on the next window, you can see that we have different defined port rules. So here, if I select the defined port rule that is currently available and click edit, I will see that I have different additional options that can be confusing at first, but in the end you will see that they are straightforward. So first you can see that I have the port ranges, so I can specify any ports. For example, I want my servers to be available only on a specific port, so you can lower the port ranges. Here it's giving the option to check most of the used and non-proper port ranges. So I'm going to leave the default in here, but of course you can modify this if you want. The protocols TCP, UDP or both, so I'm going to stick with both. And the filtering mode is a bit interesting. So you have three different filtering mode options. One is multiple hosts, one is single host, and disable this port range if you want. So I'm going to talk a bit about the multiple and single hosts. So the multiple hosts, basically if you configure this mode, all of the nodes in your NLB cluster will respond accordingly to the weight assigned to each node. So you can see that when I close this window, there are going to be different weights that I can configure. So if I set a weight of 50-50, half of the connections will be forwarded to my first node, half of the connections will be forwarded to the second node. This is useful when you have a server that is your primary web server, that is really a good server with a lot of RAM, a lot of CPU capability, and you can select, for example, 80-20. So 80 will be the main server, which is the big server. 20 is going to be a smaller server that is going to be used for connections that are only 20% basically of the total connections connecting to your web farm. Using the multiple host filtering will increase your availability and scalability, because you can increase the capacity by adding additional nodes, and they will be automatically added into this multiple filtering mode, and so that you can add additional servers to support your environment. So a little bit about the affinity. So the affinity, you can see that I have three options: none, single, and network. The none option, the none mode, will allow any cluster node to respond to any client request, even if the client is reconnecting after an interruption, for example. So if a client is connecting to your web page and there is a small network connectivity outage, the client will reconnect to the cluster and all the nodes will respond to that request. On the other hand, the single affinity mode, if you select this one, a single cluster node will manage all the requests from a single client. So that if a client is using your web server and there is a network outage, my cluster will remember that this client was being serviced by the one of the nodes in my NLB cluster, and the same node will respond to that client request afterwards. So the last one is the network affinity mode, and this is related to the network itself. So a single node will respond to all requests from a Class C network. So if you have a Class C network, your clients are coming from Class C network, only a single node will respond to those requests. So if we move down on the next filtering mode, which is the single host, what this filtering mode will do is basically it's going to the node with highest priority, and if you remember, the priority was the lowest number. The host with highest priority will always service and all of the client connections will be routed to this host. If the host is not available, the next host with the next priority will be used for the client connections. So this mode can give you, although it can give you a better availability, the scalability is not that good. And in the end, you have the option to disable this port range, and basically what this means is all of the client requests that are coming to this port range are going to be dropped. So there you go, a bit information about the filtering modes. So for my selection, I'm going to choose the affinity none, so that all of my hosts can respond to all of the connections even if there is a small network outage. So I'm going to click OK, and you can see that pretty much everything is configured, and I can proceed and click finish to configure my to start configuring my NOB cluster. So you can see on the left side the NOB VPN 01 that is being and my Ethernet card 0 that is being used. You can see that there was a small outage, a small network drop because the server is being configured for my NOB cluster. And right away you can see that on the bottom there is a log file, basically a log file saying what is going on at the moment. And you can see that the configuration succeeded. And if you check on the left side, you will see a small computer icon with green around it. This means that my node is operational at the moment, and basically the status will say converged. If the status is converged, this means that my first node from my cluster is up and running and operational and ready to accept client connections. One small thing that I can see from my cluster that I forgot to do is just add the name. You can add the name or change the name of the cluster by using the full internet name in here. So I'm going to select the name, which is going to be NOB cluster, and I'm going to click OK. You can see that I have a message saying that the cluster name will change from nothing to NOB cluster, and if I want to apply these changes, I will have to do them on all hosts in the cluster. In my case, I have only one, so what I recommend doing is add the name when you configure the cluster. I missed it, so I'm going to change this by clicking yes. So the cluster name will change, and the configuration is going to change on my nodes as well. So the nodes will be aware in which cluster are they residing at the moment. Now that we have the cluster configured, I'm going to switch to my domain controller, because what I need to do is I need to add a DNS record, an A record for my cluster. So if you remember, the cluster name was NOB cluster, so I'm going to right click and create an A record. So this is going to be NOB cluster, and the IP address of the cluster will be the virtual IP address that we configured, which is 10.0.0.122. So I'm going to add this and click done. So now we have the virtual IP address of the cluster with the name of the cluster in my DNS. Now that we have my DNS setting, my DNS record added into my DNS, I'm going to switch back to my cluster, and I'm going to add another node, another host to the cluster, which is going to be my second node. And I'm going to add the IP address 10.0.0.2, click connect, and I'm waiting for the wizard to find my server. So after few moments, it needed to think about it. For some reason, it found that my interface name is Ethernet 0 as well on this server, so I'm going to click next. And you can see that I have the next lowest priority, which is going to be 2. So 2 is going to be the priority for my second node in my NOB cluster. I'm going to accept this one and click next. And pretty much the next settings, I'm going to leave the default. You can see that even they are dimmed out. So these are the settings for the cluster itself that we configured previously. So the only thing I need to do is click finish, and it's going to start converging my second node in my cluster. So you can see that the status is pending at the moment, and on the bottom it's pending operation 2. So after a few moments, it's going to add the second node, and we can continue with our fully built NOB cluster. So again, after thinking about it a bit, in the end it finished. So I now have my two network load balanced servers add it into my cluster, and the next thing I want to do is I want to test the deployment and confirm that indeed my NOB solution is working at the moment. It would be a shame if the NOB solution is not working, right? So for this purpose I'm going to switch to my client machine, which is NOB PC01, and I'm going to open a small Google Chrome. So from here, what I want to do is I'm going to open HTTP and then NOB cluster and press enter. And you can see that for my NOB cluster, if you remember, we did create the DNS record for the cluster. For my NOB cluster, I can see that currently my first server is responding. So my first server is responding, and if I try to click a few times refresh, it's not going to change to my second one. Nevertheless, I'm going to try with Internet Explorer and see if that would do the trick. If not, what we can do is I'm going to suspend the first node and see if the connection will automatically go into the second node. So let me open a new tab, close this one, and open NOB cluster. Okay, NOB cluster. Yep, I need to add something else. NOB cluster. Okay, again, my first website is responding, and if I click refresh several times, you can see that only my first site, my website 1, is available at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my website 1 and see if indeed my network load balancing will work. So my website 1 server is my storage server. So what I'll do is, you can see that if I right click, I can delete the host, I can check the host status, control the host, and from here I can start, stop, drain stop, suspend, and resume. So I'm going to stop this host and see if this will work. So it's again taking its time, not responding. Yep, you can see if the host status is stopped, you will see a small red icon around the computer. So again, I'm going to switch to my client computer, and I'm going to hit the refresh button in here, and you can see my website in my NOB cluster changed to website 2. So if I refresh here as well, website 2. So again, the NOB solution is working, which is nice, because after all, this is NOB solution channel. If my NOB solution is not working, I'll be ashamed. So again, I'm going to start the host, and I'm going to wait for it to be joined to the cluster once again. Okay, you can see that it's converging at the moment, and when the converging is done, it will be green icon. Now it's yellow. So if you see a yellow icon and the node is converging, it means that something is going on with this node. So you need to take a look. Maybe you need to suspend it a bit, or take it out. If something is going on with the server and needs reconfiguring, you can take it out from the cluster and then re-add it when it's fully working. Now that the conversion finished successfully, I'm going to switch once again to my client desktop machine, and in my Internet Explorer I'm going to click refresh a few times, and it's still website 2 being accessed. But if I open Google Chrome once again and open the cluster, you can see that this is just a cached version, unfortunately. So my website 1 is responding once again, and it's up and running once again. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to forcefully shut down my web server 1, and we'll see how long it will take for while refreshing on my client, and we'll see how long will a user experience a problem with the connection to the server. So I'm going to power off the machine, and it's down, so straight away 2 refreshes and website 2 is now the main website, the available website for my client. So if I switch here and click refresh, it's going to think about it, and you can see that the NOB cluster is saying that it's not able to connect to my server and it's being unreachable. So any further client connections will be routed to my first VPN server. So this, guys, is how you can configure an NOB cluster, network load balancing cluster, in Windows Server 2016. Before ending the video, I just want to thank you all for the support over the years, because it's more than 1 year now that NOB Solution is adding videos in YouTube. I just want to thank you all for the support, for the comments, for the likes. You can always share my videos if you want. You can always if you have any questions, you can always put them in the comment section, and you know that I will respond to them as soon as possible. This was Nick from NOB Solutions, and this was how you can configure an NOB solution.